This video is brought to you by me. I made a t-shirt and a whole bunch of other things. You can buy them in the description if you want. Okay, bye. Within the scope of One Piece, I think Water 7 is perfect. When I began my journey through the extensive catalogue of arcs and sagas that make up the story of One Piece, I knew that I'd be greeted by engaging, lovable characters. I knew I would be taken on long and complex stories, and I knew it was going to be great. But I could have never predicted what was going to happen in this arc and the emotional, character-driven storytelling that made this, for me, a brave, intelligent, and important story specifically for Shonen Jump to show its reader base. I had no idea things were going to develop like this, but boy am I happy that they did, and I have so much to say about it and praise it for. Today we explore the exuberant, the enchanting, and the excruciating arc that left me in an emotional tizzy with my jaw firmly on the floor. I'm totally not Mark, and these are my first impressions of, thoughts on, and review for the most unexpected arc in One Piece's story for me, and one of, if not, my favorite installment so far. This is the One Piece Masterclass, Water 7.
俺たちもう仲間だろ。
World building is a term that I've thrown around a lot since I started covering this story, and when someone repeats the same term again and again and again, it starts to lose its meaning. One of my favorite aspects of Dragon Ball was the incorporation of Snake Way and the afterlife for Goku to explore. It not only added a much needed sense of levity to the circumstances of that story at the time, but it also provided further insight to mechanics and lore that would be called upon as it continued. And that's sort of what world building is in a nutshell. In One Piece, it's so painfully obvious that Oda adores this world that he's created, and he fills it with everything his imagination can see fitting in there. And this isn't just for fun, but to establish and to give us, the audience, the impression that this is a real, breathing world, with real technology, real political structures, and geography. And this is all in an effort to create believable, real characters for us to enjoy within this world. And let me tell you, these characters in this arc felt gut-wrenchingly real, and I mean that in the best possible of ways. But more on that later. Once again, this story is incredibly impressive in how it establishes what the situations are. It gives the audience a goal to aim for at the very beginning, which changes as the story evolves, and the separate storylines that establish themselves early on, independent of each other, start to intertwine until they clash in what I can only describe as the single most compelling set of chapters I have ever in my life read through. But before I drool over how ludicrously perfect this arc is, I want to impress upon you the importance of what Oda did to establish this arc in the first place, because it's brilliant. Two major points of contention within the arc come from one singular piece of information and goal that's established and built upon at the very beginning. They need a shipwright because the Merry-Go is struggling with damages. From this single piece of info, we understand that this arc will center around the recruitment of a new crewmate, which in and of itself is exciting, but the means with which Oda weaves this tale is not only compelling but stupidly effective. So let's take a look. The goal, as I mentioned before, is established early on, and even before they hit land on Water 7, we are introduced to this drunk old woman that is quite literally what nightmares would look like if they took human form, but she does give the crew a letter to pass on to Mr. Iceberg, and we see some really interesting technology in the form of a seafaring train too. But once again, this is far from the last bit of new tech we see, and when it comes to world building, once we arrive on Water 7, Oda opens the floodgates, exploring this beautiful new area he's introduced, inspired by Venice but with clear and obvious Oda twists on the theme, with its wildlife, its culture, and most impressively, how it implements and makes use of its abundant supply of water, fashioning waterways and even elevator systems, which is all explained to us among many other things. Because much like Skypiea with its dial technology informing the culture that it's built upon, Water 7's architecture and culture is of course built around the fact that it has so much water incorporated. There's an infectious attention to detail here that makes me just want to leap onto the page and explore these worlds for myself, and not to mention talk to these inhabitants. And that's not only the sign of a great writer, but it's also the sign of a writer who loves the world that he's creating. So much so that I'm certain no one loves this world more than Oda, and it shows. But part of what made this one so exciting and interesting thing to watch was that right from the get-go, as they arrive on Water 7, the gang split up into 4 separate groups. Luffy, Usopp, and Nami travel to the shipbuilding area to suss out the situation regarding repairs, and with their top priority being that they need a new shipwright too, we also are looking for that. Chopper and Robin are out seeing the area, Sanji is shopping for groceries, and Zoro is guarding the ship. All super straightforward stuff and no conflict just yet. Luffy even meets the town's famous shipwrights, who are pretty big celebrities in the town, and there's this really cool character wearing a hat that has the weirdest nose I've ever seen, but somehow the coolest character design too. Needless to say, things are going too smoothly, and so it's time to inject some conflict, and boy, do we get conflict from the most unlikely of places in this arc. As this cool shipwright Assassin's Creed's his way across the city to check on the Merry Go, Zoro ends up needing to defend the ship from some evil looters called the Franky family, which he does so with ease. But that's not the only bit of conflict here. This strange masked someone walks by Robin, whispers something into her ear, and she starts to walk away with it, losing Chopper in the crowd. And it's these chapters that offer setup to later events that most people might not see as highlights, but one aspect that stuck out to me was a particular chapter that covered Sanji's set of affairs. In it, we see the shipwright all-tiring and parkouring his way across the rooftops to see the Merry Go, and we also see Robin being guided away. This is all from Sanji's point of view, and we don't really ever see that in manga. This felt so great to me, as it makes the city of Water 7 feel like a real place with all of these things happening in real time, rather than a series of separate scenes where characters act within. It's a subtle inclusion, but it made the world feel that much more immersive for me. And these paths crossing in front of Sanji set a series of things in motion. The Robin story thread and the Merry Go story thread. But perhaps the most interesting plot thread, the Usopp story thread. Before Luffy, Usopp, and Nami fractured away from the main group, something Oda made sure to express throughout his time writing the stories of Alabasta's saga, Skypiea's saga, and even this saga has been how much love and care Usopp gives to the ship. He's always the one repairing it, despite not really knowing how to fully, and he often makes mention of how much the ship itself means to him. It was a gift from someone he deeply, deeply cares for, and so it makes complete sense that that's where his passions lie. And how the next section is paced is honestly brilliant. Having already been foreshadowed prior with Zoro, the Franky family, in an effort to steal the money the Straw Hats have in their possession and fully intend on spending on repairs, nab Usopp and the cases he was carrying. As Nami and Luffy wonder where he's vanished off to, the awesomely designed Assassin's Creed shipwright guy reappears to give his analysis on the state of their ship, and it's fundamentally beyond repair. It's completely unsalvageable apparently, and despite Luffy's questioning and thinking of alternatives, eventually he's forced to come to the conclusion that he needs to buy a new one for his crew. This is when they notice that Usopp is missing, only to find him beaten and bloodied in the middle of the street. He panically confesses that they took all the money and that he tried to stop them but couldn't because he was too weak. He resents his efforts because, to him, he now believes that he might have just destroyed their chances of fixing the ship, but obviously we know at this point that the ship is regrettably beyond repairs. Nami leaves him against the wall before bounding towards Luffy to inform him of what happened. As Luffy gathers the crew, fills him in on the situation and the plan of action, Usopp once again staggers and makes his way back to the gang's lookout, and unfortunately gets beaten to within an inch of his life. And as the Straw Hats walk up towards the building, they once again find Usopp, barely hanging on. At this moment, I'm like, I need Luffy to bring balance to the world right now or I'm going to explode. And boy, does he do just that, and along with the combined efforts of the rest of the Straw Hats, totally demolish their hideout and all the henchmen that committed this atrocity towards Usopp. And it is awesome. This particular scene had a lot in common for me with Nami's moment from Arlong Park, Luffy avenging a crew member and friend. And this one is incredibly cathartic too, but something is hanging in the air. A certain piece of news that won't go over well with Usopp. This next section of the story is without an ounce of sarcasm, jest, or hyperbole, perfect to me. The motivating factors, the character, the dialogue, oh, the dialogue! And not to mention the physical conflict that ensues. This section made me feel a way I don't think I've ever felt while consuming manga or anime. At this point in the story, with the Franky gang having been dealt with, despite not retrieving the money, Luffy is satisfied with how things went and is ready to move on with things, but Usopp is the only one unaware of the Merry Go's current state. And this uncomfortable tension hanging in the air, once Usopp asks why Luffy is so dead set on going with a new ship. At this point in the conflict, I was incredibly nervous. I had mentioned during my Alabasta arc video that the one aspect I really didn't like about it was the conversation Koza has with the king. That conversation to me felt stilted, unnatural, and contrived because instead of speaking like real people with specific things and specific ideas with specific responses, they delivered vague response after vague response, all because the story needed for these two to have the wrong idea of each other in order for the story to work. And this is something that's in almost every single TV show, movie, or whatever. I honestly hate it, but that's not what happens in this scene. Instead, the conversation that takes place felt more real than some of the conversations I hear on the street. It felt so raw. In this scene, there's very little action. Really, it's wall-to-wall dialogue, and it had me gripped with every single page turn. And that's how you know these characters work. This scene didn't have to make up a forced reason for them to fight like Zoro and Luffy did in Whisky Peak. This didn't have a vague conversation to create fake tension like the king had with Koza in Alabasta. These two characters spoke and acted like real people. They explained themselves, and their characters informed the conclusions they came to and the actions they took in response to those conclusions. This is the best character writing I've ever seen in manga. It's pretty much perfect. It feels like a real argument between real people because we know all the same information the characters do. We understand the characters immediately and know that they are acting like we would expect them to if this was taking place in the real world. I just adore the moment when Luffy completely loses it, almost verbalizing something before Sanji cuts him off with a kick. And for Luffy to immediately regret saying that afterwards felt even more real. Conversations like this happen in real life, and they ruin relationships. There are real consequences to what you say or don't say in these cases, and now, disillusioned and feeling alienated by Luffy, Usopp challenges Luffy to a fight, the winner of which gets the ship. At this point, the relationship between the two has been ruptured. This is intensely interesting now. And what follows is equally as good, continuing the tension of the prior, only this time focusing on the action and strategy surrounding Usopp fighting Luffy. And once again, it's amazing. This is easily my favorite fight in the entire series, without question, and if that's an unpopular opinion, I swear to God, I'm gonna lose faith in humanity. I've never been so invested, conflicted, and uncertain how a fight was going to end. And I don't just mean the physical fight. This is a battle of prides and outlooks. And the best part is that I can see and understand the points of view of both characters. The Merry-Go is as much a crewmate as the rest of them. To Usopp, it holds even more sentimental value due to where it came from, and now it feels as though Luffy is completely turning his back on a friend in need. To Usopp, Luffy is completely in the wrong here. But on the flip side, Luffy is faced with an incredibly difficult decision too. He doesn't want to lose the Merry-Go either, but he has to be responsible for the lives of his crew. Both characters are in very difficult circumstances with very difficult things to talk about, and it's situations like this that make for the best scenes. And the circumstances that ensue during this battle are fantastic. Uncharacteristically unafraid and defiant, Usopp takes advantage of the deep understanding he has of Luffy, totally unloading everything he has on the rubber man, including many twists and turns, taking even me as a reader off guard, juxtaposing how terrible he looked right after the attack by the Franky family with how confident and sure of himself he is in this instance. However, as the fight pushes forward and further on, Usopp begins to wane, and that's when it starts to get hard to watch. With some fantastic symbolism in the rain making the ship look as though it were crying, Luffy deals the finishing blow to Usopp and walks away, declaring that he can have the ship if he wants it. It's tragically sad. Luffy has been up until this point steadfast in his orders and decisions, but for a split second, in a moment he's trying to keep private, pushing his hat over his face, we see him begin to break. He's human at the end of the day, and he just can't afford to be unsure if he's the captain. Echoed in a quote from Zoro that is perfectly in character for him to say, "If you waver, who can we trust?" What an amazing sequence. The psychology at play here is what made these characters work so incredibly well for me. The comparatively small altercation between a captain and his crewmate, more than any other anime for me, has explored in surprising detail what it means to be a leader and what the cost of leadership sometimes needs to be. And everything that the crew says or does not say in these scenes is informed by their characters also. This isn't just the Usopp and Luffy episodes. It's about everyone else too. Chopper has to grapple with the morality of helping Usopp after the battle. Sanji recognizes a fault in what Luffy was about to do and say and kicks him. He doesn't want him to hold on to regret like he had to with Zeph, and so put an end to it as soon as he saw where it was going. Nami in this scene wants everything to return to normal. To her, she's losing her only family and only sense of stability she's ever really had. and she's struggling with it. Zoro recognizes that this is something that needs to happen also. Every single thing in this scene is believable, tragic, and more important than anything else. It's important to realize that it achieves this intense a scene because everything in it makes sense. And before I move on, one thing I haven't ever really mentioned yet about the manga that I absolutely love is that at the beginning of each volume, it lists the name of characters and factions contained within each installment. And for the first time since he joined the crew, Usopp is listed on his own outside of the Straw Hats crew. I'm not gonna lie, this broke my heart. But it's a really nice little detail and clever use of space to do this little bit of storytelling. Not to mention reinforcing the consequences of a scene that was utterly spectacular. In commemoration of my journey through the high seas of One Piece, I figured it's about time the TNM crew got their very own official pirate flag design. Made by the community, for the community, this minimalist design is based on my very own avatar with an obvious One Piece twist. I think it looks awesome and it's available in t-shirts, hoodies, crewneck sweaters, phone covers, and all that good stuff. All in the description down below. This design will only be available while supplies last, so if you like the design or want to support the channel, cop yourself some new style and join the pirate crew today.
A bunch and say goodbye to your friend!
A weapon to surpass Metal Gear.
The Mansion Heist. I think something One Piece does that always makes sure I'm invested is that it utilizes well-established characters like Usopp and now Robin in this instance as both a motivating force for the characters and as an incentive for me, the reader, to keep on reading. It's a testament to how wonderfully structured and realized this Straw Hat crew really is. If two of them having an argument can yield such a visceral reaction from me, I was very eager to see what they did with Nico Robin next. And I wasn't disappointed. I glanced over this earlier, but while at the shipyard, Luffy and Nami pass on the letter to Mr. Iceberg given to them by Kokoro. Apparently, he's the mayor of the town and seems like a likable stand-up dude. Well, I didn't know it then, but even here, they were setting up groundwork for a major plot point thread to happen in the future. Now, if you cast your minds back to the Skypiea video, I made mention of Nico Robin and my feelings towards her being that of mistrust. I felt as though there was something she wasn't letting on. She felt very removed from the group, and so when the CP9 masked figure came out of the shadows to lure her away, I suspected immediately, naturally, that something was up. But I had no idea she'd turn out to be an official member of a secret government group that at this moment is tasked with retrieving something of vital importance from the mayor of Water 7. But the thing is, we don't actually see any of this, and how it's all revealed felt so much more like a mystery thriller to me that I actually loved it. All the while Usopp and Luffy were duking it out, CP9 and the rest of them had infiltrated and made an attempt on Mr. Iceberg's life. And as Luffy and the gang wake up from their night's sleep in the inn, they are met with conflict after conflict. Their first conflict comes from the leader of the Franky family. Franky himself, who is a cyborg, which pretty much throws out all of my sense of what the current level of tech in this world is capable of. Anyway, he's charismatic and fun, but he stole all the money and spent it all too, which, when I honestly read that at first, a little part of me died inside. But what really got me was what happens next. Iceberg wakes up after being shot several times, only to point the finger at the Straw Hat crew. Nico Robin apparently was responsible for the attempt on his life, and now they are all wanted by the city. Okay, so what? Usopp is now estranged, Robin is a cutthroat for some government organization, all the Straw Hats are being persecuted for this action on behalf of the entire city, and to put the icing on the cake, a massive tidal surge is expected to hit the city tonight. This current set of predicaments felt so incredible to read through, tensions were high, and there was a mystery in the air. Why was Robin doing this? And furthermore, what I love is that despite all of these major story beats hitting hard, Oda doesn't just let Usopp be forgotten until he's needed again. Not even in the slightest. Fully in character, he has Chopper and Sanji covertly let Usopp know what's up regarding a massive tidal surge that's to be expected tonight without hurting his pride. There are so many little things like this that are being juggled in this arc that Oda not only keeps track of, but also delivers compelling scene after compelling scene with. He didn't need to have this scene with Sanji and Chopper. He could have just had Usopp make some random mention in the next scene that he appears in that he saw that the tide was changing, but he instead made a character choice. He asked himself, what would these characters do? Sanji and Chopper care deeply about him, and thus of course they would look out for their friend. It not only adds context to why Usopp moves location later, but reinforces the entire theme of the story in that arc: friendship and loyalty. And really, that's been the theme from the very beginning. How much trust and loyalty should be honored, and how their dynamics mix together in volatile ways. Should you trust your captain when he breaks what you perceive to be his loyalty to a ship? Should you rely on your crew when you're faced with a massive underworld government organization? Both Robin and Usopp have believable motivations guiding their choices in this arc, and it's so well done I can't help but sit back and marvel. And in keeping with this theme of loyalty, it comes to our attention that Robin planned to pin this on them all along, betraying them, using them pretty much as a scapegoat to allow her and the rest of the CP9 crew to infiltrate the building the next night, and boy, do they. After alerting Usopp, Sanji decides to go walk around the city without saying why to Chopper, who then goes to reconvene with the rest of the Straw Hats. Just when I thought this story was lacking some twist and surprise to catch me off guard, as it happens, the Secretary and 3 of the town's famous shipwrights, including that really cool Assassin's Creed long square nose guy, were all part of CP9 the entire time. To be honest, I really wasn't expecting it to be them at all. When I first saw that one of them was wearing a feathery sort of outfit, it reminded me of the ensemble Doflamingo wore. If you were to ask me before this reveal, I would have placed all of my bets on him being involved in some shape or form, but he's not. And it gets even better. With this guy here who had been up until this point using a bird to speak from him, it turns out that he can speak for himself and uses this as an advantage to try to take the blueprints off of Paulie. And on top of all of that, we finally start to get some answers surrounding the story of Nico Robin, the poneglyphs, and what the Pluton is that Crocodile was after in the first place. It turns out it's a battleship, a massive weapon that if wielded could bring about destruction on a worldwide scale. So, needless to say, it makes sense as to why he keeps those private, and I also really like the reasoning why just destroying them isn't an option for them either. It's important to make sure that if something does rise up, the Pluton could be its equalizer. These blueprints for the Pluton that Iceberg was in possession of are a wonderful little plot point in the background that I'm guessing will be an overarching plot thread for many more arcs to come. I'm also happy we finally got some information about Robin's backstory. An orphan child from a specific people that almost died out. She's the last one and therefore the only one with the ability to read the poneglyphs, making her, in the eyes of the government, dangerous if she isn't working for them to bring the weapon to their possession. This is my first taste of proper large-scale world politics playing a role in the One Piece story, and it made it feel all the more intense because of it. The scope has never been larger. No longer is this a self-contained arc. No. This time it's concerning itself with all the information and breadcrumbs left behind over the last 3 sagas. This arc feels enormous, and this is all just build-up. This whole Nico Robin situation is entirely set up to be the catch-22, the conflict of this arc, and it serves the purpose tremendously well. Acting in a similar fashion to Nami in the Arlong Park arc, Robin denounces her allegiance to the Straw Hats straight to their faces when confronted by them in the act. Once again reinforcing the themes of loyalty and friendship by having Robin seemingly cast such things to the side. However, after they discover the blueprints to the ship have been hidden elsewhere, she is told to take her leave to the last train to Enies Lobby before the enormous tide arrives at midnight. While this also adds a massive amount of tension to the occasion as Enies Lobby is a place of no return apparently, there's also a time limit involved now with the tide. And to add tension on top of tension, the CP9 agents, former shipwrights, take out both Zoro and Luffy with just absurd ease, sending them flying across the city. But they don't kill them. Despite having the power to do so, which was interesting to me, ever since they revealed their true intentions, they have been quite literally unstoppable in terms of physicality, mastering certain techniques and practices that allow them to pretty much have the power of gods in their fingertips, which makes for some gross and truly unsettling imagery. Which all serves the big fight scene where Zoro, Nami, and Luffy all corner the shipwrights but are unable to do anything to them. The lead shipwright pretty much transforms into a giant leopard, swatting away both Zoro and Luffy without so much as a second thought. And with Robin helping these guys, it's honestly an incredibly complicated situation to get a hold of. But wouldn't you know it, Oda has a reason for that too. As it happens, Robin isn't bad and doesn't feel uncaring towards them at all. In fact, she loves them. Her only condition on working for CP9 was that her friends would be spared, and spared they were. In this arc, everything is slowly falling into place. And what makes it even more interesting is that Mr. Iceberg's confidant, the person he entrusted the Pluton blueprints to, was none other than... yes, Franky. And now, with time running out, Robin boarding the train, the two best fighters out of commission, and the gang completely separated, it's times like this I not only reflect on the story and how it got here, but how much I love these damn characters. I mean, there's this spectacular scene where Franky is just chilling and reminiscing with Usopp about the merry-go, how the ship was staying together for them because it loved them, and how he needs to accept the fate of that ship too. Switching from an antagonistic force to a main good guy character is an incredibly difficult thing to pull off, but he does so by being so damn charismatic, regaling Usopp with an explanation for the vision he saw in the jungles of Skypiea, that it was in fact the spirit of the ship struggling to stay together for them because it really truly cared about them, which not only humanizes the ship but also allows us to be thankful towards Franky for sharing that information so kind-heartedly to Usopp, who's clearly struggling with it. Through this, we learn that Franky is actually a really chill and honest, responsible guy. Obviously the word honest is in quotations there, and what's more is that we get a fantastically compelling backstory for him, wherein we learn that he's the one that has the blueprints, he grew up under the man who made the seafaring train, and that guy was the one who made Goldie Roger's ship, and what's more is that the antagonist from the government in that flashback that killed his father figure Tom is now behind the CP9 situation at Enies Lobby. See what I mean about all of these seemingly unrelated plot threads developing in real time and clashing with each other in natural ways? Well, it just keeps happening. The CP9 bust into their workshop and kidnap both Franky and Usopp, but not before sending the merry-go crashing to the sea below, which not only makes me want these guys to be eviscerated from existence, but now they are on the train with Robin. And what's more is that they are heading to a place called Enies Lobby, where in addition to no one ever really returning from there alive, is also the place where Franky's father Tom was sent, and it's where Robin's being sent to also. I just love this story that all converge right at the end, but not before leaving our heroes in dire straits. And it's moments like this that make me think, God, it's so difficult to choose a favorite among these characters. They're all so perfectly realized and enjoyable in their own different ways, but I think when I turned the page and realized that Sanji all this time had been waiting outside the train for Robin to arrive and leave in, I might have fallen in love with him there and then. It's still between him and Usopp, but I just adore Sanji. He's the perfect blend of flawed, cool, and he absolutely drives the plot forward in ways few other characters do in this series. The train. The train sequence in this arc might be the best set piece idea in all of One Piece I've experienced so far. It's straightforward to understand in that Sanji needs to make his way through the train cars to reach Robin, Usopp, and Franky. There's a clear goal for Luffy and the rest of the crew to pursue them in order to give Sanji backup. There's a built-in time limit as they are about to arrive at Enies Lobby shortly. The gang is separated, the villains are together, and the motivations are clear. Save Robin, save Usopp, and save Franky before the blueprints fall into the wrong hands. And boy, was I rooting for Sanji during this one. The setup is honestly great too, with each subsequent car in the train filled with more and more dangerous foes. But once Sanji reaches Usopp and Franky, who were held towards the back of the train where he initially hid, the strategies implemented are clever and satisfying to watch, with the majority of the bad guys lured to the back of the train before being cut loose entirely. And why I love this isn't just because it's a clever plan on behalf of Sanji, it's that it also highlights why this particular action sequence is so interesting and fun in the first place, as Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Chopper, the Water 7 shipwrights, and the Franky family are following in another train behind them. And because there's only one train track, it means that anything that is cut loose will eventually have to be dealt with by Luffy and the gang as they chase after their friends. Honestly, it's an incredibly creative sequence, and the best part is still to come. You see, once Sanji saved Franky and Usopp, despite wanting to help out Robin after understanding the situation, Usopp still felt tremendous shame, and so, instead of running away, he decided to disguise himself as Sogeking. I think this is really clever, as it sort of comes out of nowhere in the story, but all the motivations and materials for this decision are there. Naturally, we understand that Usopp wouldn't want to face the team after what he had said and done, but what I found really subtle but great is that earlier in the train car fight, Sanji makes a passing remark about all the people he just took out only having costumes and masks on them and nothing else of value, which he says directly to Usopp. So not only does Usopp have the motivation to create this disguise in the first place, but he also knew where to get the materials for it, which Oda didn't need to do, but it just shows the insane level this man operates on. And speaking of details, remember when I mentioned when Usopp left the crew after his fight with Luffy that Oda took him out of the manga character breakdown Straw Hat group? Well, now he took out Usopp entirely and replaced him with Soga King, which is hilarious. I just adore stuff like that, and it just reinforces the notion that this is a story that rewards you for paying attention to the little details. I've never been more satisfied as a reader as I have been while reading One Piece. At its core, Water 7, and I think One Piece works as well as it does because of the ridiculous detail and attention Oda has given to its world. Without all of this polish, these characters wouldn't feel nearly as believable. And to me, the show's greatest strengths are its characters and how these characters bounce off the themes of a given arc. For instance, the motivations Usopp had to save the merry-go are the same motivations that Luffy has to save them. He is putting the lives of his crew at risk, braving treacherous waters, heading towards a place that certainly won't be a cakewalk, all to be there for his friends. And it's parallels like that that create this incredible feeling while reading. And by the time Franky and Sanji buy Usopp enough time to sit down and talk with Robin in the front car alone, it once again highlights the strength of this series. It doesn't need world-ending stakes to be captivating or fantastical. We just need to care about these wonderful characters, and when Usopp says, "Have faith in Luffy" to Robin, I honestly shed a tear. Because that line encompasses what this entire arc has been about. Usopp called Luffy's judgment into question, fought him over it, and now deeply regrets it. He sees Robin making this same mistake and is trying to help her see reason. It's incredibly purposeful writing, and it's bloody fantastic. This series sucks you in and forms an incredible connection with you. You always want to know, are these characters going to be okay? And I think that's what makes this one of the best stories I've ever read through. And what's more is that it's brought me closer to so many wonderful new talented people in the community. Last week I held a competition to see who could draw the best avatar for me on YouTube and Twitter, and the standard was just ridiculously high. But by the end, this wonderful person won, and now this will be my new Oda-style avatar while I cover the high seas of One Piece. But with that said, and with the train now closing in and arriving at Enies Lobby, I have sincerely no idea what to expect or what will happen. I adore the characters of Franky. I think he's incredibly distinct, and given the amount of backstory and detail this character has received, I would be very surprised if he didn't turn out to be the shipwright of the Straw Hats when all is said and done. Next week, I will be covering Enies Lobby and the post-Enies Lobby material. So, look forward to that, but that'll do it for this video. As always, I've been Totally Not Mark. I'll see you all next week, and thank you so much for watching.